The renowned French historian Marc Ferro once remarked that each nation, or nearly every one, possesses several stories that overlap and contend with each other. The same historical event may appear differently when viewed from the perspectives of different countries. For instance, an apparent aggressor to some may seem like a victim to others. Military criminals may be hailed as heroes, while the darker chapters of history may be omitted. When the distortion of history becomes a familial matter within a country, and when the violation of reasonable boundaries transforms into a nationwide phenomenon, questions arise about how this might impact each one of us. In August 1991, Kim Hak-sun, a Korean woman, testified publicly that during World War II, she had unwillingly been a comfort woman. That is, she had serviced Japanese soldiers in military brothels. Until then, the woman had hidden her past for fear of condemnation in her homeland. It was unacceptable for Confucian Korea to engage in such behavior. 46 years after the end of the war, this was the first public acknowledgement of one of the thousands of women who were enslaved by the Japanese. After Hak-sun, other women who survived testified. That same year, 35 South Korean citizens filed a class-action lawsuit against the Japanese government. Many of them had to go into hiding after the war, living in other countries. It took a long time for them to find the strength to return to their homeland. In the 1990s, the topic of comfort women became publicized and remains a sore subject today. For Japan, it is another black stain on the pages of history. But the land of the rising sun is not in a hurry to admit guilt. In 1932, Lieutenant General Yasuji Akamura obtained 223 reports on crimes against women committed by Japanese soldiers in occupied China. In connection with this, the Lieutenant General approached his command to establish the so-called comfort stations, in order to prevent the soldiers from being reduced due to disease. The first such station opened the same year in Shanghai. Initially, the plan of the Japanese military and political leadership was to have the comfort stations staffed by Japanese nationals, particularly those who had experience in the profession. As Japanese soldiers became more interested in the stations, their numbers increased, and Japanese women became scarce. Subsequently, individuals from other nations, mainly Korea, Indonesia, China, the Philippines, Thailand, and New Guinea, began to be brought to the stations. They were lured in various ways, including being bought from poor families, deceived, or kidnapped. For example, they were offered jobs in factories or the chance to marry Japanese officers. Those who accepted these seemingly decent opportunities ended up in Japanese brothels. Later, the stations became known as Niguichi, or 29-to-1. The daily standard was for one woman to serve the soldiers, increasing to 50 on weekends. Under such conditions, each woman could not last a month, and the mortality rate was very high. According to various estimates, up to 200,000 women visited the stations in 13 years. According to Chinese and Korean estimates, the number is 400,000. After Kim Hak-sun's confession was made public in 1991, the Japanese government refused to acknowledge its involvement in the establishment of the comfort stations, citing a lack of supporting documents. The following year, a publication by Japanese historian Yoshimi Yoshiaki revealed materials to the contrary. In the years that followed, the Japanese administration stuck to the line that the Imperial Army was only involved in some forms of the establishment of stations and the forcible confinement of women. Today, Tokyo is still not prepared to recognize legal responsibility in the issue of comfort women. This is likely inconvenient for current Japanese politicians who harbor ideas of Japan's historical revenge. For instance, the new generation of Japanese is being raised on carefully edited textbooks that omit the dark chapters of defeat. These textbooks avoid discussing Japan's crimes against humanity. It is also possible that the failure to legally recognize responsibility hides the fear of setting a precedent. After all, a number of other lawsuits by other affected states, such as the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia, would follow. Japan's attempts to shrug off its historical past can be viewed as an effort to rehabilitate itself in the eyes of the international community. The humiliating defeat in World War II is long past and largely forgotten. Present-day Japan is experiencing a revival of former power and greatness. For instance, this can be observed in Tokyo's desire to revise the 9th article of the Constitution, which prohibits Japan from establishing land, sea, and air forces. Many interpret this as Japan's attempt to embark on a path of militarism, involving a military buildup for the purpose of waging war.